Good morning, Asia. Good evening, America. You're watching World DNA with me, Diksha Bisla.
And I am Adya Juneja. And coming up on the show today, US President Donald Trump further extends a pause on strikes on Iranian energy facilities for 10 days until April 6th, saying talks with Tehran are still ongoing and going very well. While Trump insists Iran has been begging for a deal to end the war, Tehran flatly denies being engaged in any such negotiations. We'll get you the latest on this on the show today.
Of course, and while conflicting claims continue to emerge from the war front at the cabinet meeting earlier, Trump said that US would be Iran's worst nightmare if it doesn't agree to a peace plan. Now this while attacks on Israel, Iran and Lebanon continue unabated. There's still dense fog around when and more importantly how this war will end, which is now about to enter its fifth week. We're going to unpack where things stand and what the larger implications are on the show today with expert analysis. But before we do that, let's quickly take a look at the headlines.
Israel's military says it carries out strikes on infrastructure targets in Tehran early Friday. The brief statement describes a wide-scale wave of strikes against Iranian regime in the heart of the capital.
US President Donald Trump says he will delay planned strikes on Iranian energy facilities for 10 days. And this is until April 6th to allow more time for negotiations. Stresses talks with Iran are progressing well.
Something's unusual happening. There are 8 boats that are going right up the middle of the Hormuz Strait. They then apologized for something they said, and they said, we're going to send 2 more boats.
The US president says Iran allowed 10 oil tankers to pass through the Strait of Hormuz as a gift, signaling willingness to negotiate after previously restricting shipping in nearly 4 weeks of war.
I say they're lousy fighters, but they're great negotiators. They are begging to work out a deal. I don't know if we'll be able to do that. I don't know if we're willing to do that.
Donald Trump insists that Iran has been begging for a deal with the United States to end the war. Despite Tehran's senior leaders denying any such negotiations, US President denies that he's desperate for an agreement.
Israeli military announces it needs about 15,000 additional soldiers to support operations in southern Lebanon against Hezbollah and establish a buffer zone. Says IDF is operating on multiple fronts, creating shortfall.
The US judge suspends sanctions imposed by Trump's administration on Anthropic, saying the measures likely violated law in punishing the AI powerhouse for expressing unease about Pentagon's use of its technology.
South Africa says it's been excluded from June G7 summit in France after initially being invited, cites US pressure. But President Ramaphosa later clarifies he has no information of any country exerting such pressure.
Japan reportedly plans to temporarily lift restrictions on coal-fired power plants as it seeks to ease an energy crunch which is caused by the West Asia war. Set to roll back rules that were aimed at curbing greenhouse gas emissions.
Iran announces a ban on sending sports team to events in countries it considers hostile ahead of a scheduled game between an Iranian and an Emirati club in Saudi Arabia.
US President Donald Trump has said that he is pausing attacks on Iran's energy plants for 10 days.
Well, at the Iranian government's request they said that talks with Tehran are going very well.
Well, in a post on Truth Social, Trump said that he is pausing the period of energy plant destruction by 10 days. And this is till Monday, which is April 6th. He further added that despite erroneous statements by the contrary, the talks with Iran are going pretty well.
Earlier, Trump held his first cabinet meeting since Iran war, where he spoke a lengthy on various aspects. He said Iran is begging to make a deal with the US. This even as he reiterated obliterating Iran's Navy, Air Force, missile arsenal and defense military base.
Smaller version of what we're doing now. We're crushing their missiles and drone stockpiles, destroying their defense industrial base. We've wiped out their Navy completely, their Air Force completely. We've wiped out a large percentage of their missiles. And the missile launchers, without the launchers, the missiles don't do.
Well, Donald Trump also said that Iranian leaders are finding it hard to communicate with each other as their first and second tier leadership is gone now. Listen to this.
Nobody's a match for the United States, but they're not a match for the United States. It's small potatoes. That's why I'm so disappointed in NATO, because this was a test for NATO. This was a test. You can help us. You don't have to, but if you don't do that, we're going to remember.
Trump said that Iran now has the chance to abandon their nuclear ambitions. He warned that US is Iran's worst nightmare and that Washington can keep the strikes going unimpeded.
They now have the chance, that is Iran, to permanently abandon their nuclear ambitions and to chart a new path forward. We'll see if they want to do it. If they don't, we're their worst nightmare. In the meantime, we'll just keep blowing them away, unimpeded, unstopped. Well, there's not a thing they can do about it. They can't do anything about it, I tell you, if they could, you'd be hearing about it. You'd be hearing about it. You don't hear anything about it.
And on the Strait of Hormuz, Donald Trump said that US doesn't need Hormuz to fulfill its energy needs. However, he said that it will require 100% success rate to open the strait. Even one missile hitting $1 billion ship is unacceptable.
The problem with the straits is this. Let's say we do a great job. We say we got 99%. 1% is unacceptable, because 1% is a missile going into the hull of a ship that cost $1 billion, right? So 1% is we can't. If we do a 99% decimation, that's no good.
The US president told reporters that taking control of Iran's oil was an option, but said that he would not talk about it. He further claimed that the Tehran's present to him was allowing 8 big boats of oil to pass through the Strait of Hormuz.
There are 8 boats that are going right up the middle of the Hormuz Strait. 8 big tankers are going loaded up with oil right through. And I said, well, I guess they were right, and they were real. And I think they were Pakistani flagged. Yes. And I said, well, I guess we're dealing with the right people. And actually, they then apologized for something they said, and they said, we're going to send 2 more boats. And it ended up being 10 boats. All right, I hope I haven't screwed up your negotiations, but I thought it was appropriate to say, because I did taunt you the other day by saying they're going to give us a present.
And to discuss more, we are now being joined by Adrian Calamil. He's a fellow at Arabian Peninsula Institute and Terrorism in West Asia Scholar. Adrian is joining us live from New York. Always a pleasure to have you with us, Adrian. Now, we're hearing these conflicting claims come out from Washington and Tehran, where now Washington has extended its pause on strikes by 10 days, where Iran still continues to maintain that it's not engaged in negotiations. How do you read this contradiction?
Well, good morning to you, first of all. And yeah, it's really bizarre, to tell you the truth. And I hate to say this, but I actually believe more of the messaging coming out of the Islamic Republic at this point. I say it, and I'll frame it this way. I don't think Trump was ever serious about hitting the electrical grid, the power grid, and putting the nation in a complete blackout. He's been pretty clear in some of the targets that he hasn't selected, such as the Artesh, which is the National Army, and some of the other power grids. And then he was very upset with Israel for hitting South Pars, which is a shared oil field or gas field with Qatar. And so he's always looked at a day after plan, and hitting that grid, I think it was done out of a place of anger. It was after, I think it was over 100 civilians were killed in Israel. There was the launch on Diego Garcia, a missile that could also hit New Delhi, London, Moscow, 2,500 miles. And, he did this. We know he's prone to making these statements. I think he made this statement out of anger, and it wasn't wise. Now, having said that, I think he's saying these negotiations are taking place, sitting back, taking a look at the Strait of Hormuz for what he has said that he hasn't heard any noise out of the Islamic Republic. Well, the Strait of Hormuz is a lot of noise. I think he's trying to figure out, looking at that, and also trying to sow discontent within the regime. This is a regime that is paranoid to begin with, and then this war has only turned them even more paranoid. And then you'll have certain elements within the IRGC wondering, who's talking to Trump and through what back channels, and what is going on. So it almost seems like a bit of disinformation on the part of the president, is my reading of it. I could be wrong.
Right, and President Trump has interpreted the passage of 8 to 10 tankers through the Strait of Hormuz, which he calls as a gift. So how did this event impact his 15-point plan?
Well, it's interesting because and that's a great question. I believe they were Pakistani flagged tankers. So if they're going to be flagged for countries that, China, Pakistan, other countries, they're going to let them go through. I don't see how this is a big concession on the part of Trump and seeing this as a gift. And in working with this 15-point plan, a lot of it is still very nebulous. We know about the nuclear program. We know about the ballistic missiles. We know about the terror proxy funding. But beyond that, there needs the drone manufacturing. There's going to be other details, but it's still very murky as far as what's in that plan. But I will say this, is that the regime, the very fact that they're closing off the Strait of Hormuz shows that they really have very little leverage left at this point. This was their last card. One of their last cards to play is to try and cripple the global economy. And if and when it gets cleared up, then the regime's going to be facing further difficulties.
Right, we hear you, Adrian. And speaking of the 15-point plan, we understand that Washington wants Iran to roll back its nuclear program, its missiles and proxy groups in the region, which Iran has flatly rejected and has even called them excessive. Instead, Iran has listed out its own conditions. And of course, those conditions are going to be a hard pill, a bitter pill to swallow for Washington and its allies. But the impasse is just becoming more clear as we go ahead. Both sides want an end, but their terms seem to be mutually exclusive at this point. Is that how you read it as well, or do you think one side will have to blink first?
No, I think you're exactly right, Diksha. I think that's the situation is that, the regime wants, they say they have an inalienable right to enrich and reprocess. And the rest of the world knows that when you enrich and reprocess, those countries produce a nuclear weapon. They've been unwielding on that, the ballistic missiles as well, and then the proxies. That's a whole other issue. But, just on the nuclear issue, they will fail on that. And the United States is not going to allow this to happen. So you're right, this is a collision course.
Right, Adrian, we still have lots to unpack here, but we'll have to slip into a very short break. Please stay with us. For our viewers, you're watching World DNA. We'll be back with our expert analysis on the conflict investigation. But for now, after a short break.
Vielleicht nur als Imposant.
Welcome back, viewers. You're watching World DNA with me, Adya and Diksha. And right now we are joined by Adrian Caramel. So, Adrian, coming back to the aspect of what we were discussing right now, you see Donald Trump insists that Iran has been begging for a deal with the United States, whereas Tehran senior leaders are saying that no, there is no such negotiations that has been happening. So how do you assess all of this? And do you think that, this would change the course of this war?
Yeah, I still have to go back to the fact that I don't see who could possibly be negotiating with Trump. I look at some of the figures. Golubov is one of the most senior figures that's been named and kind of thrown around the media as the person that they could possibly be talking to. He's denied all claims of even doing so. So it's there are some real points, some real sticking points that we will never meet on. And Trump saying that they're willing to make serious concessions, that means that they're willing to give up their nuclear program, they're willing to give up their ballistic missile program, they're willing to stop funding proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, all the proxies in Iraq. Those are a lot of big asks, and I can never, from having been up against individuals connected to the regime on panels, I know they will never give those things up. It's just not in their DNA. Right now, it's about regime survival. And I know survival for some people think that, yeah, that makes sense. They're rational actors. There's individuals wanting to cut a deal. But until you get to a certain level in that government, and that's way, way down, I don't think you're going to find a person that will want to cut a deal with the United States.
Absolutely,
ever.
That is a fair point, Adrian. And despite the claims of leadership change, and as you mentioned, the name of Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf being brought up, we understand that he is no Delcy Rodriguez and Iran is no Venezuela. And the continued survival of the Islamic Republic appears to have only emboldened Tehran at this point. And it is believed that Iran has both time and geography on its side, according to many analysts. What would it actually take for Tehran to step back at this particular time in the conflict, according to you?
Yeah, another great question, Diksha. What I think with that leadership right there, now individuals like Ghalibaf, Vahidi, Mohsen Rezai, there's some top-level players. And I'll point back to the Ali Larijani strike. These are individuals that have grown up through the ranks of the IRGC or the Ministry of Intelligence Services or both apparatus. They have had tremendous power over the population and those structures which hold power of the economy, of the security of the country. Once you remove one of them, they don't have a lot of people with as much talent and the connections and I would say the fear element that when, Ali Larijani said to do this, people jumped up and did it. it's almost like removing a Qasem Soleimani from the battlefield. You can't really find a replacement for that type of guy. So as soon as they start to remove some of these individuals, then you may find that that person that's willing to negotiate. But I think it's again the president of the United States, Trump, Netanyahu, have stressed for the Iranian people to stay in their houses, do not go out in the streets. And I think they will eventually get that message, because I do think there are a defined set of targets that are over 8 weeks long. We're halfway through. And now Trump's trying to figure out how to finish this off.
Right, Adrian, and even though Trump says that the US, it doesn't rely on the Strait of Hormuz, but how would a disruption there impact all global oil markets? Because we are seeing that happening, and countries heavily dependent on the Gulf energy, where Trump also stated that it doesn't impact the country, but quote unquote Iran has given him a very expensive gift by letting the ships pass through it.
Yeah, by letting those ships pass through it, I think it does kind of grease the global economy to a certain degree. The United States, for what we're paying at the pump, or as far as oil coming down through the Strait of Hormuz, I think it's only about 3% for the United States. But when you talk about the other countries, especially Asia, Southeast Asia, you name it, they are going to be impacted, because Kuwait's going to have a problem, UAE's going to have a problem. They're all going to have a problem getting, and that's going to eventually impact American consumers when they go to go to any store. That's going to drive up costs. I do think the Strait of Hormuz is going to be a relatively short-term problem. Just today, the United States or Israel eliminated the individual responsible who's engineering this whole blockade right now. So you can see the kinetic actions are still taking place, and I think they're still trying to. I truly believe that the biggest concern are the mines. They're worried that they have been indiscriminately mining. And in order to guarantee safe passage, they need to make sure that a tanker doesn't bump into a mine somewhere or along the way.
Right, Adrian, and at the same time, President Trump's option, if you look at it, they may be expanding, because with the deployment of around 5,000 US Marines and paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne Division, of course, they are being deployed, but this is not without risk. And any ground operation, of course, raises the prospect of casualties. We already know that some nearly 300 American soldiers are already injured. Now, of course, the question is, does Washington really have the appetite for deeper involvement in the region, given that it's also expressed deep mistrust for NATO and its transatlantic alliances already is come into question? Now, given all of this backdrop, do you think it would actually be willing to send troops on the ground, and we could be looking at a protracted conflict here?
Those are great questions, Diksha. I don't see it as being protracted. I do think there is a possibility that one of the smaller islands that no one talks about that has actually been used to manage and shut things down, and it's called Larak Island. That there is the possibility of seeing U.S. troops take that island to make sure that it's not a staging ground for the IRGC Navy and a place where they can coordinate the blockade. But I know there's been mention of Karg Island and some of these other places. I don't see that happening. And there isn't, you're exactly right, there isn't an appetite back home for the United States. And I do believe that positioning, as some people have mentioned, troops on Karg Island, which is way up the Persian Gulf, that's it's unnecessary. Number one. Number two, it puts our soldiers in real danger. It's hard to protect, and there's just no strategic sense behind it. So, I think it's more force projection, but I don't, it's me just kind of reading into what we're sending into the region.
Absolutely, Adrian. And there is still a lot of fog around the claims, and the counterclaims were emerging. But for now, thank you so much for helping us sift through them. And always, it's a pleasure to have your insights on the show. Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, it's time for us to slip into a very short break on World DNA. But don't go anywhere. Coming up on the other side, even as US President Donald Trump, he insists that negotiations with Tehran are underway. Tensions on the ground are escalating fast. In the latest, Israel's military says it has carried out wide-scale strikes on Iran. We'll get you all the latest on that on the other side of World DNA. Stay tuned.
Five states, one powerful voice. From Tamil Nadu to West Bengal. Kerala to Assam. Every vote shapes the future. Get the election pulse only on WION.
WION, India's global voice. The channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One. From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening. As we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
In West Asia, every move shifts the world's balance. Wars, ceasefires, alliances, power never stands still. From Tehran to Tel Aviv, from Damascus to Doha, the West Asia Post cuts through the chaos to reveal the region that shapes the world. Because what happens in West Asia never stays in West Asia. This is the West Asia Post, the region's story, the world's impact.
WION Health Resort is unique, the only one of its kind. Experience the 4 paths of natural wellness: yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy. Each uniquely customized program improves the whole person to make every person whole. Come to WION Health Resort. Make your reservation at wion.com.
In-depth coverage of global issues broken down into facts, figures, and simple words. Backed with analysis from field experts who truly matter, because we believe in decoding the real picture for you. So you get a much wider and deeper understanding of stories from around the world, a 360-degree analysis. An award-winning documentary series, week after week creating the maximum impact. Watch WION Wide Angle at these times on WION, World is One. Get the latest updates.
Destroy their
Breaking
missiles
news.
and raise their...
Credible, clear, continuous. Experts across aisles. Diverse voices, one platform. WION World is One. 5 states, one powerful voice. From Tamil Nadu to West Bengal. Kerala to Assam. Every vote shapes the future. Get the election pulse only on WION.
Vielleicht nur
Welcome back. You're watching WION The World is One, and this is World DNA. This is Adya and Diksha. And let's start the segment with some headlines.
Sirens sounded across Tel Aviv early Friday as Iran continues its missile attacks on Israel, hitting Tel Aviv, Haifa and other areas. One person killed in Naharia after a Hezbollah rocket barrage.
Israel's military says it carries out strikes on infrastructure targets in Tehran early Friday. The brief statement describes a wide-scale wave of strikes against Iranian regime in the heart of the capital.
US President Donald Trump says he will delay planned strikes on Iranian energy facilities for 10 days, and this is until April 6th, to allow more time for negotiations. He stresses that talks with Iran are progressing well.
Something's unusual happening. There are 8 boats that are going right up the middle of the Hormuz Strait. They then apologized for something they said, and they said, we're going to send 2 more boats.
US President says Iran allowed 10 oil tankers to pass through the Strait of Hormuz as a gift, signaling willingness to negotiate after previously restricting shipping in nearly 4 weeks of war.
I say they're lousy fighters, but they're great negotiators. And they are begging to work out a deal. I don't know if we'll be able to do that. I don't know if we're willing to do that.
Donald Trump insists that Iran has been begging for a deal with the United States to end the war. Despite Tehran's senior leaders denying such negotiations, US President denies that he's desperate for an agreement.
Israeli military announces it needs about 15,000 additional soldiers to support operations in southern Lebanon against Hezbollah and establish a buffer zone. Says IDF is operating on multiple fronts, creating shortfall.
Mexican Navy is searching for 2 boats carrying humanitarian aid to Cuba with 9 crew members. The vessel departed from Quintana Roo State last Friday and were expected in Havana earlier this week.
Students in Santiago protest education policies under President Jose Antonio Castro, with police using water cannons to disperse crowds. Protesters threw objects at police vehicles, but no arrests were reported.
Oil prices fall on Friday and were down over a volatile week. Brent is headed for its first weekly fall in 6 weeks, while WTI has fallen for a second consecutive week, with Trump talking up the prospect of ending the war.
Israel has carried out fresh strikes against Tehran, even as US President Trump extended the pause on strikes against Iran's energy plants until April 6th as negotiations continue.
Well, Israel's military has said that its forces carried out a wide-scale wave of strikes targeting infrastructure of the regime in the heart of Tehran early this morning.
The latest attacks come after Tehran reported 3 explosions in the north, which occurred during a heavy downpour, followed by a roar of warplanes over the city.
Well, sirens also echoed across Tel Aviv overnight as authorities warned residents of possible Iranian strikes.
Meanwhile, U.S. Central Command says American soldiers are maintaining Patriot mobile interceptor missile systems in the region, helping sustain the most extensive air defense umbrella in West Asia.
The U.S. Air Force also released images of an F-35 Lightning II refueling midair while flying a combat mission during Operation Epic Fury earlier this week.
The Pentagon, for the first time, has confirmed the use of uncrewed drone speedboats in its operation against Iran. Officials say the global autonomous crafts have already logged over 2,200 nautical miles in support of the campaign and are being used for surveillance and kamikaze strikes. The deployment comes as a direct counter to Iran's recent use of sea drones against oil tankers in the Gulf.
Now, as the air war intensifies, a major buildup is occurring on the ground. Citing defense officials, the Wall Street Journal has reported that the Pentagon is considering deploying up to 10,000 additional ground troops to the region to give President Donald Trump more military options. And this even as he continues peace talks with Tehran.
Meanwhile, the mood is defined on ground in Tehran. Pro-government supporters rallied in the Iranian capital against negotiations with the United States, shouting slogans and carrying posters. The protesters called on the government to reject talks with Washington.
Trump's whole approach is psychological warfare. He is only playing psychological and media games and making a mockery of himself in front of the world. Everyone knows that Trump is a major liar.
Every rational person knows that negotiating would be a crime. They would go again, rebuild their strength and return. The authorities certainly understand it as well, and God willing, they will not do it.
Now, as the West Asia war nears a month, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian is looking east, thanking Russian President Vladimir Putin for the country's support. Pezeshkian stated that Russia's backing and the Iranian people's resilience, it will foster new alliances, securing East Asia and regional stability.
Meanwhile, Speaker of Iranian Parliament Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf insisted Iran will not lose the opportunity to break what he called the vicious cycle of war. He said the sacrifices of the people and army have set the stage for historic victory.
Across West Asia, industrial targets across Iran face mounting destruction. Well, verified footage showed a warehouse engulfed in flames in Arzabil province, while thick smoke was seen rising over the industrial hub of Kar in the northeast.
Well, U.S. President Donald Trump has once again lashed out at NATO. Trump once again called the military alliance a paper tiger that is doing nothing.
Well, he made these remarks during the first cabinet meeting of the U.S. administration since Washington first launched strikes on Iran on February 28th. Well, Trump was flanked by Secretary of War Pete Hegseth on one side and State Secretary Marco Rubio on the other. U.S. President also said that he was disappointed in NATO for not actively participating in the war and that he will remember it. Listen to this.
Nobody's a match for the United States, but they're not a match for the United States. It's small potatoes. That's why I'm so disappointed in NATO, because this was a test for NATO. This was a test. You can help us. You don't have to, but if you don't have, if you don't do that, we're going to remember.
Trump's comments come as after NATO chief Mark Rutte's media interaction. While presenting the alliance's annual report, Rutte was seen defending Trump on several occasions while answering a reporter's question on the U.S. president's objectives for NATO. The bloc Secretary General went on to talk about Trump's role in increasing defense expenditure from other member states.
Good afternoon, Mr. Rutte. President Trump is calling your organization an organization of cowards. You're not responding to that. Is that your strategy to keep the Americans on board?
Well, let me be clear, as Secretary General, of course, the alliance is very dear to me, otherwise I would not have this role. But as I said before, the United States, under this president, is doing stuff which is quite crucial for the alliance. But then I have to repeat a little bit of this. Starting again the dialogue with Russia, breaking that deadlock, getting the peace process going. It is making sure that the whole of the alliance came up to the 2%.
Several NATO member states have expressed concern over the escalating war in West Asia, which has further triggered a global fuel supply crisis.
At a diplomatic event on Thursday, Finland President Alexander Stubb almost immediately responded to Trump's comments on NATO, while the American leader's statements were still underway. Stubb said during a media briefing that the war in Iran is not a NATO matter.
Now, Stubb further said, and I'm quoting him here, "We're very pragmatic with our transatlantic partnership. Part of it is value-based and most of it is now interest-based."
Several countries have expressed interest and willingness to participate in a joint exercise to help keep the Strait of Hormuz open. But after the war is over, 31 countries have joined the declaration regarding the key maritime passage.
And China has issued a strong warning to the United States against bringing conflict and the chaos of the war to the Asia-Pacific region.
Well, this as Washington and its allies eye building a weapons base in the Philippines.
Beijing's response comes after a US-led intergovernmental defense group agreed last week to assess funding for a new ammunition assembly and production line in the Philippines, according to a joint statement.
Well, the decision was made by the 16 members of the Bloc for Indo-Pacific Industrial Resilience, which also includes the UK, Australia, Japan, South Korea and the Philippines. China's foreign ministry has warned that a potential ammunition facility would destabilize the region and it would backfire.
The US and its allies should earnestly respect the common aspirations of regional countries, do more things conducive to peace and stability, and refrain from introducing bloc confrontation, conflict, and the chaos of war into the Asia-Pacific.
Now, the recent discussions regarding an ammunition facility are built on a proposal floated by Washington last year. Now, according to reports, the proposal was about opening an ammunition production and storage facility.
At Subic Bay in Zambales, Philippines, it was once home to the largest American overseas naval base until its closure in the year 1991 to plug logistical gaps across the region.
The Chinese Foreign Ministry further said that Beijing would firmly safeguard its territorial sovereignty and security interests. And this as Beijing and Manila have clashed frequently in recent years over disputed territories in the South China Sea.
In July last year, Philippine President Marcos Jr. told his US counterpart Donald Trump that the project would support Manila's self-reliant defense program. Trump said he hoped both sides would amass more ammunition than any country has ever had.
Well, after a gap of more than 36 years, the historic Raghunath Mandir in downtown Srinagar has reopened,
marking a moment of cultural and emotional significance for the region. Take a look at our next report.
Located in the Habbakadal area of Srinagar city, the historic Raghunath Mandir is among the oldest in the valley. The temple, built in 1857, was forced shut due to rise of insurgency 36 years ago. Reconstructed under the government's Smart City initiative, the Raghunath Mandir committee marked the occasion with great grandeur and a special puja on Ram Navami. Organizers expressed their gratitude to the administration, which paved the way for the installation of the temple idols in the months coming by.
This temple was built by Maharaja Gulab Singh in 1857, and is one of the oldest in the area, modelled after the Raghunath temple in Jammu. Ram Navami was once celebrated here with great fervour. But for the past 36 years, we could not hold any celebrations as the temple had fallen into a dilapidated state. Today, after its renovation, we are grateful that the administration heard our concerns and made this reopening possible.
Members of the Kashmiri Pandit community came from across the country for the occasion. They were joined by local Muslims as they reflected on a shared sense of belonging and unity.
If you look at the history of this area, especially as it was 36 years ago, it was full of life with people from both communities living side by side. Processions of Kashmiri Pandits would pass through these streets, and we would stand along the roads to welcome them. The banks of the Jhelum river were a shared space where we met every morning. There was such a deep brotherhood that no one could distinguish who was a Pandit and who was a Muslim.
The temple's reopening is not just a restoration of faith, but a powerful symbol of Kashmir's enduring communal harmony.
It's after 36 long years that one of the oldest temples in the heart of Srinagar city has been reopened for the public, especially for the Kashmiri Pandit community. As you can see, we are right now in the Raghunath temple, which was built in 1857 and was closed for 36 years, has finally been reopened. The Kashmiri Pandit community says with the opening of this temple in Srinagar city, there is hope that the Kashmiri Pandit community that had migrated out of Kashmir will finally return back. With video journalist Feroz Idris Lone for WION World is One.
Two US senators plan to introduce a bill that would ban the government from buying humanoid robots made by Chinese firms.
Right, and the proposed legislation aims to block federal funds being used on robots that could pose national security risks. Well, the bill called the American Security Robotics Act is being introduced by Republican Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas. And Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer of New York, it would prohibit the federal government from buying or operating humanoid robots, which are manufactured by adversaries like China, and block the use of federal money in connection with such robots. The legislation comes as Chinese firms, including Adibot and Unitree, they compete with US companies like Tesla to produce humanoid robots that can perform tasks ranging from industrial work to household chores.
Right, and Cotton said, and I'm quoting him here, robots made by communist China threaten Arkansas's privacy and our national security. Whereas Schumer said, and I'm quoting him here, they are running their standard playbook, this time in robotics, trying to flood the US market with their technology.
Now, the bill would include exemptions for the US military and law enforcement, allowing them to study Chinese robots as long as the machines cannot send or receive data to or from China. Now, lawmakers say that humanoid robots could be used to gather data or be controlled remotely, raising concerns about potential spying or sabotage. US inflation pressures are showing fresh signs of intensifying, while import prices surged in February by the most in 4 years.
Well, the data is now raising concerns that inflation could remain elevated for longer, complicating the Federal Reserve's path on interest rates. Here's a breakdown of what's driving the surge and what it means for inflation and policy ahead. Take a look.
US import prices surged 1.3% in February, marking the sharpest monthly increase in 4 years and significantly exceeding market expectations. The rise was broad-based, driven not just by a rebound in fuel costs, but also by higher prices for food, consumer goods, and core imports. Fuel import prices alone jumped 3.8%, while food prices rose 0.8% across categories, including vegetables, meat, and oilseeds. On an annual basis, import prices increased 1.3%, the fastest pace in a year. Core import prices, which exclude food and fuel, also climbed sharply. This comes even before the full impact of the Iran conflict, which is reflected in the data. The ongoing conflict with Iran is now feeding into inflation expectations, particularly through energy markets. Oil prices have surged more than 30% since late February, raising concerns of sustained cost pressures ahead. Economists warn that disruptions, including the effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz, could further push up fuel and shipping costs in the coming months. In addition, fertilizer prices are rising, pointing to further increases in food inflation globally. Businesses are already reporting higher input costs and passing them on to consumers. The surge in import prices is complicating the Federal Reserve's policy outlook. With core inflation expected to remain elevated, the central bank is likely to remain cautious on rate cuts. Markets are already dialing back expectations of monetary easing, with policymakers signaling a prolonged pause. Meanwhile, tariffs remain a structural factor, with studies showing up to 90% of tariff costs being passed on to domestic prices. While tariffs have boosted federal revenues, their broader economic impact remains limited. Business Bureau, WION World is One.
The Indian Army has transformed a rusted military structure near the Chinese border into a hotspot for tourists.
Well, the Indian Army has opened the Border Brew Cafe in a remote valley in Arunachal Pradesh, Tawang district, where women are rewriting their own future. We're going to leave you with these visuals, but don't go anywhere. More news and updates will follow on the other side. You're watching WION World is One. Stay tuned.
Elections, alliances, controversies, and power play. Beyond the noise and rhetoric, no election, no ballot issue too small. Stories that analyze global and domestic politics. More than just headlines. A dedicated show with varied perspectives, expert take, citizens' voices, detailed ground reports, and in-depth coverage from political corridors of the world. This is Race to Power, only on WION. World is One.
The stress of our world can take a toll on our physical and emotional health. Here, in New York's Catskill Mountains, lies a luxurious place of healing called WION Wellness Center. The WION Wellness Center provides 500,000 square feet of natural methods to manage diabetes, hypertension, chronic pain, obesity, depression, anxiety, and other conditions. We use the traditions of centuries-old natural science from India, yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy in personalized programs that help you take charge of your own health. A minimum 5-day stay is recommended for best results. Book now at yo1.com.
In West Asia, every move shifts the world's balance. Wars, ceasefires, alliances, power never stands still. From Tehran to Tel Aviv, from Damascus to Doha, the West Asia Post cuts through the chaos to reveal the region that shapes the world. Because what happens in West Asia never stays in West Asia. This is the West Asia Post, the region's story the world's impact.
In-depth coverage of global issues broken down into facts, figures, and simple words. Backed with analysis from field experts who truly matter, because we believe in decoding the real picture for you. So you get a much wider and deeper understanding of stories from around the world, a 360-degree analysis. An award-winning documentary series, week after week creating the maximum impact. Watch WION Wide Angle at these times on WION. World is One. 5 states, 1 powerful voice. From Tamil Nadu to West Bengal. From Kerala to Assam. Every vote shapes the future. Get the election pulse only on WION.
WION, India's global voice. The channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is One.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening. As we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch. Where darkness hides behind every corner. Where the truth is stranger than fiction. A show that dives deep into the stories which shock and mystify. Unsolved murders. Psychopaths who defy explanation. International war crimes. And millions swindled in financial fraud. The victims, the accused, and the sinister plot. Crime is your front row seat to darkness.